recorded.
3 hours later.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready to travel to Indonesia?
I can't afford that right now.
Through our third eye.
Yes, let's go.
Okay.
On Alter Ego, we explore where the sacred meets the psychological. We discuss sensitive topics involving trauma and mental health through an educational, ethical lens.
We aim to bring understanding, openness, and curiosity, not sensationalism. Content warnings include violence, conversations of coercion, and Heather wants me to mention some bodily fluid. Listener discretion is advised. Heather, have you ever wondered what the healers of Indonesia are like?
Not specifically, but now that you ask, I'm curious.
So today we're going to take a journey into the perversion of a sacred tradition rooted in healing and ancient medicine.
Okay.
But before we learn about a man named Ahmad Suradji and the ordained dream that he had, let's first take a look at what and who Indonesian healers are.
I'm there.
So we are traveling to Medan, Indonesia, where both modern day and ancient practicing shamans and healers are referred to Dukun. Have you ever heard of the word Dukun?
No.
So Dukun is a traditional healer, shaman, or spiritual intermediary found throughout Indonesia, Malaysia, and parts of Southeast Asia. And this role predates Islam and Christianity in the region and merges animist. So animist is, I looked this up and it's a really interesting practice. It's very rooted in nature and animals and basically the belief that there's this connection with the earth, and that's for another time, but for right now. So this predates Islam and Christianity in the region. It merges animist, Hindu, Buddhist, and then later Islamic influences. So much like whenever we talked about sleepwalking, this is similar in that there are many different types of, not necessarily traditions like we broke down in that. This is more so that there isn't one single kind of Dukun, but that the term serves several functions. So there are many different types of healers. Ones who set broken bones or treat injuries. Dukun Bai, who is a midwife who assists in things like childbirth, protects infants, or performs postpartum rituals.
Cool.
After birth. And then there's Dukun Sanet, which would be a practitioner who removes or sends curses, which is Santet, which we'll get into a little bit later. So hold on to that one.
Awesome.
And then there is this, also hold on to this one, would be Dukun Susuk and Dukun Palet. And these are specialists who perform charms or spells rooted in attraction, love, charisma, business, things like that.
Just like on Etsy.
Just like on Etsy. I actually have that written down here. Just like Etsy witches.
Yeah, exactly.
Modern day Etsy witches. So funny.
Yeah.
So another term, or a couple more terms to kind of hang on to, which would be Dukun Sihir, which is occult or black magic specialists. They are feared, but still sought after. So they kind of have this interesting, it reminded me of your voodoo.
That's what I was just about to say.
Where there is this reverence to it, where they're respected, but it's not something that you go around looking for every single day. But when
you kind of hope that you never need to need them.
Yes. And there is a difference between black magic and white magic. And we'll very briefly touch on that a little bit later. Unfortunately, in this context, it's perverted. Basically, we'll get there. And then the last one would be Dukun Pengabatan. And that one is a general herbalist or spiritual healer. So right along the lines of a lot of different things that we've already talked about in different episodes.
Yeah, you're telling me to hang on, and I ran out of hands a while ago. There's a lot. A lot.
So the Dukun sits at this intersection, right, where it pulls together medicine, psychology, social care, and especially it is for lower income areas where formal healthcare is not accessible. So things like therapy, any kind of medical intervention, these are the places where they're more likely to be very prevalent in helping people that, wouldn't have access to funds, wouldn't have access to the means to get medical care. Where we'll be at today is going to be around in the 80s. So we're not going too far back. So this is still very applicable, even with our story today. So this is a space where the vulnerable are. So if this is, it is very communally upheld, and it is a very high honor, and it is very something that in practice is just very, very sacred to be a Dukan, to go to a Dukan. There's just so much respect and high praise for these individuals because there is no exchange, of goods or services. It is like for the service of the community. Right?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So across Indonesia, the Dukan is not a fringe figure, but a fixture of everyday life. So long before hospitals and formal psychology, in these rural villages, right, even way back in the day before hospitals even existed, these practitioners and shamans served as healers, mediators, and even spiritual guides. And so they might deliver babies like we talked about before, or they'll provide like an herbal mixture that is medicine. They can lift curses like we talked about. And also something else is that they can, depending on the type of healer or type of Dukan, can communicate with ancestors.
Cool.
Yeah. So their work really weaves together practical knowledge and also the sacred duty. And to become a Dukan, you are either ancestored in, so you are by your ancestry, your generations before you are practitioners in Dukan, and therefore it's like a lineage, or you are drawn to and by some sort of like sacred drawing in, and you have kind of like this respect in the community already. There's this, from what I understand, there is this, if you have previously proven yourself as someone who is already in that vein,
you're sort of like a pillar of the community who feels a calling to do this.
Exactly. Yes. And sometimes there also is not the ancestral knowledge, right? Sometimes lineage like cut, sometimes lineage, things can change where it's like you actually can't trace your lineage. And so that's up for, okay, maybe it was ancestral or maybe it wasn't their lineage and we don't know, but they're called to become a Dukan. But it is not something that you can just step into easily. So it carries a lot, this is, a lot of lineage, a lot of respect is involved. And just like I was saying, a lot of this is inherited from family or even an apprenticeship. So you can go if you feel called communally, if you're already part of the community and you feel called to be a Dukan or shaman or a healer, you can do a very long apprenticeship. And their power is believed to come from ancestral spirits, from nature, or from God. And a skilled Dukan is expected to maintain balance. So that's this very across cultures concept of the balance between like body and spirit. We hear that a lot. And also, this was really cool, the balance between the living and the unseen. And something about that phrasing, I was like, ooh, I really like that concept of the unseen. And I had never really thought of that in that way before. Have you?
No.
The unseen, because it leaves it up for interpretation. It's not ghost, it's not ancestor, it's just the unseen.
It's like spirit in all of its forms.
Yes. And so overall, this practice and this power is to be used for harmony and not harm.
Okay.
So even in the concept of what some refer to as black magic, it's not to be used for harm. So because they work within a moral and spiritual order, the Dukans hold this enormous and very weighted communal trust. So it is a very big deal to be a Dukan. And they often are the first person that say, I'm in crisis. I'm not going to go straight to a hospital. I'm not going to go straight to authority figure like
You're
police.
going to call them.
I'm going to go straight to a Dukan. And so they are that first line of whenever there's a crisis, you go straight to them before a doctor and before anybody else. So people seek them out for things like physical ailments, but also stuff like heartbreak, for any kind of failure, life success failure, whether it's like business failure or a relationship or marriage failure.
It's like a life coach and a doctor and a therapist.
Yeah. And then you would then go to a different Dukan for, right?
For
Like if
each
I'm
thing.
if I'm having infertility issues, I'm going to go to the one that is specifically for infertility, versus if I'm having like something happen with heartbreak or business, then I would go to a different Dukan.
They're like deities.
Yeah, there's this level of, oh, this specific Dukan is an expert in this.
Yeah. But
And it's
instead of like praying to them, you literally go to them and
go
say like,
to
hey,
them.
I need help.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And this is what I understand as far, the word shaman has obviously been very,
Oh, it gets thrown around fast and loose these
it
days.
gets thrown
Yeah.
around. And this is the truest sense, like in the truest form, they are shamans. So also, this is really interesting. This kind of falls in line with some appropriated stuff that I've seen even modern day. So many Dukan believe that illness can be spiritual, and that life can be quote unquote blocked, and that a Dukan can cleanse or realign the flow of what's called unforeseen forces.
So like chakra aligning or
Yeah.
energy blocks like Reiki.
Energy. Yes. That's what I was thinking about too, was Reiki.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So, within this context, it is very easy to understand why someone like Ahmad Suradji could operate for years without any suspicion.
Oh. Oh no. Okay. I forgot we were going to be talking about something other than just like, isn't this a cool practice that these
Isn't
people
this a cool
have?
practice? Yeah.
Okay. I'm
So,
back in.
we'll talk a little bit about briefly touch on what.
Okay.
I'm not going to get too graphic. So, from the front end, I'm not going to be describing anything in graphic detail. So, anybody holding on to their seat, just know that it won't get too graphic, but it does get dark. So, Ahmad Suradji performed familiar rites. So, he did things like prayers, he practiced with incense, he referred to offerings, did night ceremonies. And this all aligned with the spiritual legitimacy of being a Dukan. So women approached him for help with things like beauty or charm rituals common in local cosmology. This is a very culturally normalized thing, is to go to a Dukan in order to perform different rituals for attraction or beauty. And so when he So when he instructed them to do certain things,
Uh-oh.
the practices were sometimes used symbolically anyways for things like purification or rebirth, and they accepted his authority without question.
Uh-oh.
Eee, ew, ah, right? Like all the noises. Yeah. So the ordinary trust that the community has for a Dukan was exploited, is where we're going with this. So where a healer is meant to restore, Suraji inverted the ritual, turning it into something very dark, cloaked in sacred language.
Ick.
So, ick for sure. Women followed him not because they were naive, but because his methods mirrored rituals that they had sensed since they were young.
Yeah.
That
They're
they
like,
had seen
oh,
since they
I
were
guess
young.
I didn't know the details of this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This all feels very, very normal until it's not. And so today in Indonesian communities, it is still debated on how to honor Dukan tradition while also preventing exploitation. So even now, this is like a big, culturally significant thing, is how do we continue these ancient and very deeply sacred traditions without people getting exploited?
My first thought was, I don't know if maybe I'm trying to find that line because they do sort of replace physicians. But my first thought was like, generally speaking, there's a physician of a different gender than your physician in the room with you. And the idea is sort of like as a witness,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I'm like, are there only, and I'm using obviously just like two genders here, but are there male Dukans and female Dukans? Are there just male Dukans? Is there like
I actually did not anywhere see any specification around gender, but in this specific situation, the perpetrator is a male and the victims are female.
Because I mean, obviously, I'm not claiming to fix an issue that's happening in Indonesia. I'm just curious if even theoretically that would be something that could ever happen, because I also don't know enough about the rights to know if it's maybe no one's even allowed to witness it. And so therefore maybe you're not allowed to talk about it. And so no one would have been able to hear that something was not on the up and up. But anyway, that was just the first place in my brain went.
No, I think that's a really good point. And that I'm curious. I'm probably gonna look a little bit more into it, what modern day practices look like, even though this really wasn't that long ago. This is like in the 80s. I guess technically that's 40 something years, 45 years ago. And there's so much more access to things that can be also, it's just like the internet. There's so much more access to things that could further enhance the exploitation. I do feel ignorant in that I don't know about what the modern day practices are. I didn't look into that and what exactly has been done or what is practiced now. I would imagine, and this is just speculation, so I would imagine that there has have to have been a level of accountability or checks and balances, just like how you're saying, of introducing like, oh, this person is a witness, or this person is at least looking out for me in some way, or that there's two people that you go to that are both Dukhan and they both practice, similarly. In a weird way, it's making me think about how I just now thinking about this. I did not consider this while I was writing all of this, is that it, in a weird way, and I'm not saying at all are they the same thing, but the way that I'm describing it is I'm having these feelings come up around how nobody really talks about how unchecked therapists are.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. So
because even when I was saying it out loud, I was like, oh, but where we don't have that would be in a really intimate setting like therapy, where we're going to someone and saying, here's what I'm going through, or here's what I need advice about. And I mean, there's a reason why it's illegal to claim to be a therapist if you're not.
Well, the weird thing is that it doesn't really go anywhere. Someone could claim to be a certain type of therapist and they don't face any repercussions because they don't have a license to get revoked. What are you going to do? So this is actually I'm glad we're touching on this, because this is, I would say, Heather, I'm not exaggerating, 2/3 of the people that come to me have had a traumatic experience either with a therapist or someone who claimed to be a therapist or was a practitioner or licensed.
Well, and
it's a huge issue.
This gets into, and I mean, we won't segue too much here, but this gets into people saying that they're like spiritual coaches or life coaches, right? And what does that actually mean? And
it is so important to have informed consent
and understanding of what that means to that person. Because I know you and I'm thinking of a very specific example that I won't mention here, but I mean, I know you and I have looked at someone that is claiming that they can do a lot of things and help people with a lot of things, and people are paying them for that. And they have absolutely no credentials,
legitimacy,
other than the angels have given me this gift.
And some whack ass fake thing that we should have an entire session. Whoa.
This is therapy.
This is therapy. I did have therapy earlier today. So. We should have maybe a little bonus episode talking about a little offshoot. I'm very passionate about this because actually my therapist told me that it was clinically relevant. I'll say that. But my therapist told me one of the very few things I do know about her is that part of the reason why she practices the way that she does is because she even had an experience with someone who exploited her.
Well,
and it is so prevalent. It really needs to be talked about.
And let me just throw this out there. There are plenty of people, including CEOs of tech companies, that are using ChatGPT as their therapist.
Oh my God. I do understand executive functioning wise. Sure. There are things that people need to whatever, right?
But
It is,
This is the same instance of AI is also responsible already for a teenager taking their own life because it ultimately told him to.
I mean, there are so many ethical issues. I just noticed yesterday, we're tangent on tangent here, but this shit's important and that's okay.
We'll put this somewhere.
So I just noticed yesterday, I went to type in like on I already have a problem with Google, so we'll start there. And that's all I'll say about that. But I went to go type in my HIPAA compliant account that has a BAA sign that says that all of my stuff is HIPAA compliant. It says AI mode in the search bar when I go to type in the regular Google bar in my web screen. And I'm like, how in the fuck is this account that is attached to all this other stuff that is supposed to be HIPAA compliant, now you're including AI generation in here? This doesn't feel right. So that's
but my point in tangenting there is that to your point of like, well, what are they going to face? They can't have a license, it's revoked. But that's exactly the point, is the only thing that their consequence would be is that you are now a victim. You may not think that you're a vulnerable person, but we're all much more vulnerable than we think when we think that we have found a solution. So
yeah, I mean, we'll kind of hold pins in the, using AI as a therapist. That feels like a whole a hole that I would love to the branch I would love to travel down.
Yeah.
There have been so many instances of especially people who have significant relationship trauma that, I mean, it's not a shock to us that, people get exploited in the spaces where, okay, yes, I know vulnerable people are going to be entering this room kind of thing, So without going too far down the branch, it really is so deeply distressing how easily an unchecked ego in a position of power, and I'm not saying that this is completely related to the case today, this may or may not have something to do with it, but the responsibility of someone coming to you and asking for help cannot be overstated. And I have seen, heard, witnessed, seen the aftermath of so many people being the victim. I don't know, like being, if we want to call it a victim, if we want to call them, I mean, the consequences manifested of someone's actions, it ruins people's lives.
Yeah.
It ruins people's livelihoods. I've seen people where they cannot work, they cannot sleep. There are signs that the person is not for you and the person is not a safe person. I would say number one, right off the dome, transparency and clarity. If you're feeling confused and you're feeling like things look murky, bounce.
Yeah.
That's my best advice. And I genuinely would love to get into it a little bit more, but yeah, so much exploitation.
But so for these girls that didn't know to bounce, because in this spiritual space, why would they have been like, hey, what are your credentials? Because they already know them. It would be so easy to be taken advantage of.
And even then, right, if we were to parallel the two, it's like, okay, well, this person is charismatic. This person is doing exactly what I have thought and known and heard and feel that a therapist should do, or a healer or whoever, a key master, a clinician, any kind of clinician or spiritual guide or healer. And then once you're in it to a certain extent, then it might be a little bit too late before the darkness settles in, which is like this, in these cases, this is some pretty much heavier things than what I've experienced or heard of happening. When I read about this, I felt a little gut punchy. And I guess even talking about the parallel of therapists is where the gut punchiness comes from. It just hit me in a different way. So I think I'm realizing in real time also too why it hit me so deeply, because it really is just such a contortion of the power, dynamic. But yeah, so these girls are coming to this, or women really, the ages range from, the youngest was around 11 years old, it's suspected. So it's the young kids, all the way up until young women in their 30s. And one of the most, again, talking about like vulnerable populations, this took a while for people to even realize that it was happening, because a lot of the people who came in to him to help them were travelers, were people who were coming through.
Oh.
Yeah, so there were some people from the community, but it quite oftentimes was people who were kind of like coming through, kind of thing.
Ah, okay.
Ahmad Suradji was born in 1949. He was a North Sumatran sugarcane farmer. So that's before he claimed to be a Dukan. He was a sugarcane farmer. In the mid 1980s, he has a dream where he claims that he was visited by his father. We haven't heard this before. And his father commands him to do something in order to gain supernatural powers. It's a very specific command. We'll get to that later. So he operated in this gray zone. So he operated between kind of where, this is where we're pulling in like the black and white magic, is between Dukan Pungasian. These are the Dukan who claim to enhance attraction, charisma, prosperity, like we were talking about earlier. And Dukan Santet, who deal with the occult, curse removal, black magic, counter spells, things like that, referring to our thing from earlier. So the kind of Dukan that he claimed to be, we'll get into that a little bit first. So he claimed to be a Dukan Susuk, and that is the one with the charm and the attraction. That's their specialty. And Susuk actually means, the translation of that is insertion. And so this refers to a specific charm, or like a small gold needle or a diamond, a talisman, or even like an herbal preparation is inserted under the skin.
Like a chip?
Like a chip, yeah. And it could actually be physically or symbolically. So it doesn't have to be inserted, but it could be. But it could be, yeah, depending on the practitioner and how they practice. So this increases beauty, magnetism, and sometimes even luck. So this type of Dukan performs elaborate cleansing and, hold on to this one, burial-like rituals symbolizing rebirth into attractiveness or social power.
Burial-like rituals?
Yeah, burial-like rituals.
All right, don't like where we're going here.
Okay. So many of Suradji's clients were women who were specifically seeking love, attention, prosperity. And this is the exact same demographic of Dukan Susuk, which would be obviously the women who come to, it goes hand in hand, right? So the second one that falls in line here is the Dukun Palette, which is the spell casting specialist, basically. And this is the Indonesian term for love or obedience magic. So a set of incantations and rituals believed to have make someone fall in love, be faithful, or act kindly.
Okay.
So this is also
like a
important.
love doctor.
A love doctor, yeah.
Okay.
Very much not so what it turned into. So these rituals often used a bodily substance. So think hair, nail clippings, saliva. And then those are then thought to hold personal energy. So then you do the ritual with the thing, right?
Of you coming there, or of the person that you want?
Of your own body.
Of you.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So this is where things start to get a little bit leaning into the understanding of how he exactly, one, how he marketed himself, and two, what was different. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit. So some blurred boundaries. So he sometimes advertised himself as more of what's called a Dikun Ilmu Pitta or Putti. Pitta. This is white magic. This is a white magic practitioner. But he was privately performing black magic. So rituals and rites. So that then kind of highlights the exploitation of it, is that you're marketing yourself and claiming to be one thing, but really what he's practicing is the darker black magic, right? And I can imagine that if you've never done these rituals before, or if you're going to see a different type of practitioner, you may not even know. Right. Yeah. So we're going to talk about legitimate rituals first.
Yeah, we get into level set me.
Yeah. So here's what is supposed to happen. Okay. So in an ideal world, you go to a Dukan Susuk And this is what happens. So these particular traditions they belong to this affection and attraction branch of Indonesian mystical practice. So they're meant to restore balance in relationships. Like we talked about earlier, they're involved in a little bit of luck, self-confidence, and it has nothing to do with harm or control of others. And both of these practices, the susuk rituals and the palet rituals, both draw from pre-Islamic animist roots that are blended in different types of mysticism. From this worldview, charisma, prosperity, and beauty are seen as energetic states that can become blocked, like we talked about earlier. So then if he were a legitimate dukun, he would be able to then block and then help realign with beauty, charisma, prosperity, right?
Mm-hmm. So maybe my beauty juju is blocked.
Maybe.
Okay. Go on.
You don't want to go to this type of.
No, I don't, but it's just good for me to have excuses as to why I'm single when people are like, you think you'll get married again? What's going on? I'll be like, sorry, it's all blocked.
It's all blocked. It's all blocked. And you know
I don't trust dukuns anymore. So
I'm not gonna do that.
I have no options. Yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm not going to do. So some of the susuk rituals involve, just like we talked about, the small gold or herbal insertion. And methods would include ritual bathing in flower water, cleansing, recantations, reading from the Quran, offering incense and flower petals. And also, too, something that is a through thread is that a lot of dukun they themselves practice fasting, focusing in humility and silence. It's feeling very Buddhist.
Yeah, I was going to say very monk-like. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the ethical boundaries within this practice are that there is no bodily harm and that the practitioner must maintain purity. So abstinence and fasting, those kinds of things. So another really important part here is that there is consent and clear purpose. Mm-hmm. So think like self-empowerment, career, relationship, that's the direction. So you set an intention, you agree consensually to that direction during this practice and this ritual. And then ethically, this is closer to this like level of spiritual confidence building than some type of like magic or sorcery or authority type stuff going on. And then, so that's a susuk. And then the palet rituals involve, like we talked about, reincantations. So objects carrying personal essence. So that's what we're referring to, like the hair, the clippings, maybe even like a talisman or the clothing that you would typically wear. Some of the methods would be reciting incantations, repeated spiritual formulas, sometimes burning offerings while visualizing forgiveness and things like affection. And many clients were instructed to perform symbolic acts. So things like looking at the moon, praying, placing flowers in water. So it's like part of your movement is part of the process.
It's like meditating, manifesting.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you have this guide, right, that's like helping you through this specific ritual. And ethical boundaries here, they're important to note, is that this should never involve any kind of binding or forcing against the person's will. Mm-hmm. No harm, obviously, no manipulation, and an emphasis on reconciliation, not control.
Okay.
So think like power balances, not domination. So there's supposed to be a balance in the power in the ritual. What was in his dream? His father appeared. This is, think like mid 1980s. This is before he claims to be a dukun.
Yeah, he's still a farmer at this point.
He's still a farmer at this point. Although his father, this is how he gained his respect in the community, his father was known to be a healer, but someone who was not at the stage of a dukun. So people came to him for like lighter, maybe like less intense practices. I could not find any data on exactly what kind of healer that he was, but it was something much less communally upheld. And so that is how he gained his level of what later on winds up becoming this like communal kind of like, what am I trying to say? What is it called? Whenever you have status, thank you. Yes. So this is how he claims to have had the status, is that his father was a healer and now he's a dukun. So in his dream, his father appeared to him and he claims that he instructed him to kill 72 women and drink their saliva. It is unknown whether the specifics of his dream included what later we would find out would be part of his rituals. If all of those things were included in the dream, we don't know. These rituals included. So this is where it gets a little graphic. His rituals would include the burying of women up to their waist. He would strangle them and then completely bury them with their bodies, specifically with their heads facing his home.
To death. Okay.
Correct. Yes. So he was in his dream told that, obviously, that his father came to him, told him to do these things, that this would bring him supernatural power.
Okay.
Thoughts? Questions?
I mean, honestly, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in the most basic use of the term, because that is beyond natural, right? Like, that's not a natural thing to do.
True. Yeah, that's true.
And I would think...
It is beyond natural.
And I would think that he I mean, obviously he was caught because we're talking about him. So he does kind of live on, which would make him immortal.
It really is, in a way, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So, like, he is sort of supernatural now, but just...
However, he did not fulfill the entire thing because he did not get to 72. He did make it up there, but he didn't make it to 72. So a legitimate practice of a dukun would be rituals
None of those things.
None of those things. Well, that's so part of the reason why he got away with burying women up to their waist and having them be bound or to where they can't really fight back.
Wait, did you say burying up to their waist? I thought you said bearing.
No, burying.
Burying. Okay.
Yeah. So he would bury them up to their waist. And so it's like they're obviously much more vulnerable, but they are thinking being buried is part of the ritual and the rebirth, right? So the legitimate practice would be, we're doing this to cleanse, we're doing this to reclaim.
I'm grounding. Yeah.
Yeah. And he literizes the burying and the rebirth. So they actually die, but they're not reborn, right? They're buried, but they're not cleansed. And then, I don't know if
people aren't looking because they were travelers.
Because oftentimes they were people who were coming through.
So people aren't like, wow, all these women are going missing.
Well, eventually it did start to get that way because there's only so many travelers. And then you have to start like picking a community. Yeah, because locals. If you're trying to get to 72, that's quite a few people.
That's a lot. I mean, did he have a time frame in this dream? No. It was just like in general.
It was just in total.
Once you get to that number. Okay.
So other parts of this practice where I don't know if you caught the saliva part that he had to drink.
I did.
So part of that. So that is part of that Palette ritual, right? Of some part of the ritual would be collecting parts of the person, which would include like bodily fluid.
To have their energy.
Yes. So he obviously was supposed to be focusing on things like, I don't know, blessings and things like welcoming attraction. And instead it was then distorted by being dominating and using this level of obviously like authority over and just perversion, right? So obviously a legitimate practice would be a ritual that lasts a few hours. It involves prayers, offerings. His were ended with concealment of the body, and were obviously not actual real rituals. And then he's obviously doing a lot of harm. So the harm is empowerment. So the way that this is so far from, I keep differentiating between what he did and what a dukun is supposed to do, because later on we'll talk a little bit about how this case, there was a lot of harm brought to sensationalizing this case, because then it brought this level of dukun being witnessed as, you know what I mean? This gets sensationalized. They start talking about like occultist, black magic stuff. It gets very blown out of proportion.
Oh, geez.
There's actually a couple of there's a documentary, a couple of videos. I didn't watch anything because even just reading the descriptions, they were all sensationalized. It was more about him being a serial killer and like was talking about all these things. And it was like using all this like catchy, fucked up language. And I was like, I'm not watching any of this shit.
No, good for you.
Yeah.
In the dream that he allegedly had, was he told to do it as a dukun or?
No.
So he just saw an opportunity and knew that
Yes,
he had
absolutely.
like enough of a reputation because of his father to sort
Correct.
of let people decide for themselves that maybe that's
Yes.
what he is. Okay. I was just curious if he actually set out and said, hey, now I'm doing this, or if it was just like, hey, my dad was a healer. I'm feeling called to like kind of heal some stuff too. And he just kind of let people assume that reputation.
Yeah, it's suspected that in the early 1980s that he took like just a general interest in mysticism and shamanic rituals. So early 1980s, think he starts getting interested in it, like as he's still a sugarcane farmer. What is reported? I don't know if this is from his telling of it or other people talking about it. I don't know where this exactly comes from. So also this may just be speculation. Is that he consulted Ducans and joined night vigils and observed things like spirit calling rites.
He was just a smart
So that
con man.
actually, Heather, that answers your question. So there are sometimes witnesses to these rituals because that's how he learned. And apprenticeships are also you are an apprentice to someone else, right?
Okay.
So that does touch on
So it's not
things.
totally private all the time.
Right. Yeah, so he claims he receives this dream, and then that becomes the foundation of his ritual beliefs. And then he declares himself. So, like the mid 80s is when he has this dream that he's supposed to do, fulfill this specific thing to be supernatural, have these powers. And then in the late 1980s, he then declares himself as a Dukan.
So he does ultimately say, this is my title.
Yeah, this is my title. It's self-proclaimed, not inherited. His father was known locally as a minor healer. That's the term they used.
Okay.
But he had no direct lineage that was passed down. Suradji leveraged that his family was associated as some type of healer to legitimize himself. He then, in the late 1980s into like 1997-ish, is when he is publicly practicing as a Dukan, and he builds a clientele up, which in my opinion, right, this is just speculation, but after reading this, I'm like, if you're building up a clientele, you're not killing them all, so he
couldn't.
had to
he would have
yeah.
he would have to be doing well, but you know what? Maybe he had like men coming to him and they were
maybe
he had to be doing enough that it seemed not
legitimate
suspicious at first. Yeah.
Yeah, he would perform things like flower bathing ceremonies, cleansing, charm rituals, that appeared conventional. So here's what might be happening. And this is my first thought on this, is that maybe there are some rituals that are performed publicly, because it does say that he publicly practices. So maybe there are things that he is doing that are able to be witnessed by others. And then there are things like private ceremonies. I'm going to look more into this too.
That makes sense though.
To be more then the private rituals, right, are the ones that he winds up killing people in. Yeah. So highlighting all of these differences between what he did and what was supposed to be is really important. Getting into a little bit of how or why communities didn't really suspect him is that his early this is something that I did notice, is that it talks about like earlier in his practices versus later. So maybe he in the first few years practiced, and it was like building, he didn't do the killing, and he was building up to it. Again, speculation, but just based off of what I had read, I did not want to watch anything and have it mess up my head whenever retelling all of this. So everything looked normal to whoever was perceiving him, we'll say. And then people trusted that his actions were part of the symbolism, as we talked about. So no one would be concerned that as they're participating in this ritual, that there's anything to be worried about. And then here's where it clarifies that a lot of times victims were visitors from nearby villages or passing through, and a lot of them were not locals. So people were not seeing that there was a lot of missing people because they're from different areas and nearby villages.
Yeah, but what they did see was that he was probably pretty popular, which probably just helped more people go to him. Because they were like, there's people going there every night,
Yeah, and here's the thing too, is that culturally it is extremely disrespectful, unlucky, and sometimes seen as like like I don't want to say bad omen because they don't use that specific language, but it made me think of what I would interpret as a bad omen to consider a Dukan to be doing anything that is questionable, right? So culturally, you are not to question a Dukan's actions.
Okay.
Yeah. So that it reinforces the silence, right? And it like reinforces, like, even if someone did have a weird experience and that they didn't ultimately be killed, maybe they survived or something, again, speculation, is that they wouldn't
Yeah, it would be
then be
very
like
inappropriate
this.
to be like, hey, I had a really bizarre experience when I
Or
was
like,
there.
there's a bunch of people missing in my village and maybe it's a Dukan. Like, no one would say
Yeah.
that, you know? So again, highlighting these differences, right? That this is super important to avoid any type of painting Indonesian spirituality as any kind of level of sinister. It's not inherently evil. There's no, right? There's later on, whenever this case gets sensationalized, it really does a disservice to this very sacred, these very sacred rituals and these very
Sure.
important communal healers, you know? So, as we talked about, late 1980s, early to mid 1990s, he is practicing. So, he has in total, his, like we talked about, his victims range from 11 to 30. So they're lured for things like blessing ceremonies. They're actually lured to a sugarcane field near Medan, Indonesia, where this ritual pattern and all of these things that he is practicing are then engaged in.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't really know why this is the case. It may just be the environmental factors, but their bodies decomposed pretty quickly. So unfortunately, the bodies were not able to be identified, most of them.
Well, I would think that it probably is just more fertile soil, which means there's a lot more, bugs and decomposing critters.
Can more quickly just be kind of a part of the earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
In total, between 1986 and 1997, there were 42 victims. They
What?
exhumed 42 bodies from his property.
Whoa. Give me that time span again.
From 1986 to 1997.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was yeah. So the late 1990s, like late 1996 into early 1997, it's reported that around Medan, missing persons reports had escalated,
Yeah,
as
they
you can
had
imagine.
to. Wow.
Yeah, so at first, police attributed the disappearances to runaways. So I would imagine in that age range, right, that there are probably a lot of younger
Yeah, but you
women
can't have
and
42
girls.
runaways. So I'm sure it did get to a point where they were like, all right, something's weird.
Yeah. So this is our this is how we found out, is that a young woman by the name of Sri Kemala Dewi, age 21, in April of 1997, disappears after visiting Surdji for a charm ritual. So a rickshaw driver later reported that he dropped her off at his house. So she goes missing, and the only reason that this man got caught is because the police found Dewi's clothing and jewelry at his home. And after he was under interrogation, he admitted to this woman's murder. And then he confessed to all of the other ones.
He just folded.
He did. So between May and June of 1997, excavation of the bodies begins. Police and villagers unearthed bodies in his field, ultimately totaling 42 victims. Here's the part that really shocked me. He had accomplices.
What?
He had 3 wives who helped him dispose of the bodies.
Oh. Do we know more about that? Like, were they forced to? Did
We
they
know
believe
nothing.
in his story?
I have no idea.
Was it common for Ducans to have multiple wives?
From my understanding, there is no set practices for
Okay.
Dukan. Do you know what I mean? Like, although it's encouraged that they be abstinent or cleansed for rituals, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be completely abstinent and single, right? Or I don't really actually know. I did not travel too far down anything to do with his wives other than what they were then found guilty for, because their charges are different.
Okay, go on.
And because this is not, you start to really, I've noticed that it, depending on the country, depending on the area, the court documents are very different. So they emphasize different things. We focus on different stuff. And I didn't read any of the court documents necessarily. And like I said, I didn't watch documentaries. This is only me reading articles, and nothing went into detail about the wives.
Interesting.
But 2 of them were sisters.
Okay. Yeah. I don't like that. I didn't like when Hugh Hefner dated twins. I don't like when this guy's married to siblings.
You know what I'm thinking? Is this says sisters and then lists their names. And at first when I read it, I'm like, oh, the 2 that are named in the front end are sisters and then a third person. But maybe all 3 of them were sisters. Yeah. So they were all arrested, obviously. And in December of 1997, a trial opens, and a 300-plus page indictment for 42 murders, specifically premeditated murders, is opened, and Suradji confesses, and he recants every confession and says police misunderstood his rituals.
Stop it right now. So this man says, okay, I did it. And he says, well, no. What I meant by I did it was I helped them.
You misunderstood.
I never said I killed them. The audacity.
Yeah, he recants his confession. Well, in 1998, in April, he's found guilty on all counts.
Great.
And what do you think that his death sentence, if you could pick, by what method would you think he would?
Are they going to bury him alive?
No, that would be like ultimate retribution.
Are they hanging him?
Mm-mm.
Are they stoning him?
Squad. Pressing.
They're pressing him? Firing squad.
So one of his wives was sentenced to death, but later it was changed to life imprisonment. And then the other 2 were given shorter sentences as accessories. So they were not necessarily convicted and sentenced to life sentences, but they were accessories to premeditated murder.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And then in 2007, almost 10 whole years later, actually started, the whole time, it's ongoing, but up until 2007, whenever it was ultimately dismissed, there were several appeals. And yeah, he continues to say that the rituals were his motives, and he doesn't change his story. So in early 2008, the prosecutors clarify and announce that his execution is imminent, and that the appeals, they went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the appeals did not go through. And he was executed by firing squad on July 10th at 9:58 p.m. Yeah.
I am so I'm so curious about the wives, because I want to believe that they, were coerced or forced or whatever. But it's curious because, it could go so many different ways. For all we know, they could have thought that they were contributing to a ritual, or that they weren't allowed to question him because of his status, or that they believed in his dream, or also all sorts of things, from them being incredibly super guilty to them actually also being sort of victims of this
themselves.
Yeah.
I know. I there was a part of me that really wanted to dig deeper and further into it, but just even the brief things that I attempted to look at, there was no clarification as to what. And really, the fact of the matter is that what I guess we would lean into their own accounts of what happened, and who do you know what I mean? Like, how would you even
at the end
know?
Of the day, yeah. No, that makes sense.
But speculation, of course, every part of me is like to blame him for everything, and I'm like, they're part of it. They were forced against their will. They're like, but ultimately, it's like people. I don't know.
Well, but you said toward the top of this, and I almost said it, but I was like, well, I'm saying enough about how charismatic he was, and again, not news. The makings of a great cult leader, right? To come out and say, I have this predestined thing to fulfill, and look at me doing it. Look at how charismatic I am. Look at me healing people. Don't you want to be a part of this? So, he did just have like a little baby cult, which again does not make them victims, right? It makes them
accomplices.
Yeah, and it makes them very easily influenced, or maybe not so easily. I don't know. I guess it depends on your opinion of cults and cult leaders and all of that. But I mean, regardless, they decided to follow this person as far as we know. And so, little cults can do big numbers.
Yeah, little cults can do big numbers. And this was, when I say sensationalized, it blew up. Everybody in westernized culture was really hooked on this whole concept of black magic, and they called him the black magic killer. It went global. And then this was in the late 90s. So there was a lot of political stuff going on too in the late 90s to do with all kinds of stuff.
And when it was like actually popping off in the 80s, we're in the midst of satanic panic.
Exactly.
And so I'm sure it was super easy to just sink, even the American hooks into and be like, look at this. It's all over the world.
Yeah. Some, headlines were the saliva drinking shaman. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
So gross.
And I know that some people love spit. I know that for some people that is like a whole kink. Okay. And I am not trying to yuck
anybody's yum.
I'm not trying. Did you hear me start to say I don't yuck anybody's yum? But I will say right now, I don't like that.
She's not a bodily fluids kind of gal.
I don't like that. I don't like any part of that. I don't like thinking about other people's spit. But yeah, I hate that, especially as any sort of like headline. Goodbye.
Yeah, and then so international outlets stripped this of all of its context, whereas any Medan papers and anywhere in Indonesia, their whole contextualization of him was that he was a dukun that fell into a dark path, and they clarified and kept this cultural context, but then it then gets stripped of that and then sensationalized, and there people are saying things like that he's a witch doctor, and then this like weird colonial mistranslation starts happening of like that's tied to sorcery, and it very much so feels it's the perfect makings of post satanic panic 90s sensationalism.
At the end of the day, I feel like there are probably little bits of truth to every single way that it was reported. Because I can, if you are of a culture and a belief system that follows this shamanic guide, then I think absolutely there could be a reality in which he did help people that he didn't kill, obviously, not talking about them. And that perhaps he did have a gift and an ability.
It could be both, right?
Yeah, but it just, unfortunately, he used his powers for evil, right?
Yeah, and that is...
And he planned to from the beginning, but the goodness was sort of like just a side effect of power.
Right, and belief and
and so
actually engaging in ritual.
Yeah, and so it's not even that he fell down a dark path. It was that he was always going down one, but he just happened to be powerful enough that it looked like light to other people.
Right.
Which I think is a very real thing, regardless of what your belief system is. It can be very easy to be swayed by people who don't have the intentions they claim to have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that it is a sensational thing. It is sensational, and it is easy to slap a headline on something because he wasn't just, I killed someone. Right. It was a whole practice.
I guess one thing that is really important to note is that there is this whole, and I don't know if you've run across this, but this like witch doctor trope that is like tied to colonization. We haven't talked about this yet, right?
Mm-mm.
So there's this, I guess, historically, alongside colonization, like European colonizers framed indigenous healers, very similar to your South African possession
Africa stuff.
Yes, the possession case is where these European colonizers will come in and say that these indigenous healers are actually occultists and that they're dangerous.
And it's evil.
So it's like this, so it's like this language that it encourages the colonization and the differentiating and the distance from indigenous practices. And it's like also, of course, people are going to cling on to a narrative that is something like sounds occult, black magic. No one's gonna say Dukan. They're gonna say he's a sorceress, if that's even a word. Is sorceress a word? Sorcerer. I knew that didn't sound right, but yeah. So it's like this weird culmination, an icky, sticky thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, that was when I started reading about it and learning about it. It again, like I said before, it kind of just really kind of sat heavy in my tummy.
Yeah.
To put it lightly. And it really felt like it touched on so much of what and why, you know, you and I are even doing this and bringing up, you know, talk about like fear and belief. It's like that. I mean, there's just this perfect marriage of
and
deceit.
Fear as an oppressor. Again, we keep getting into this fear as an oppressor. And this is across faiths, across practices, cultures, across beliefs. This is why this is not an attack on anything. It's a common thread to be aware of
and examined.
To when you find yourself in a place where you feel too afraid to speak up, don't ignore that. It doesn't mean that what's happening is bad automatically, but you should start to go, why do I feel that way? Why do I feel like I'm not allowed to ask questions? Why do I feel like, you know, I just have to accept this blindly? Because you should be allowed and encouraged to question, because if you don't question, how can you ever have real faith? But of course, if you're in a culture where you're discouraged from questioning, then of course it's not quite that easy. But again, it doesn't have to just be about faith systems or belief systems. It can also be about ask your therapist questions. You know, it's basically a first date when you guys get together. You're allowed to decide if we're compatible or not. And if any therapist is worth their salt, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but they would want you to do that because they also don't want to wind up with a client where they're going to be like, oh, I feel like she hates me. You know, or like, I feel like she doesn't trust me when I'm talking to her or whatever. Like, that should be encouraged. Same way when you're talking to a doctor, you should feel like you can sit there and say, hey, I'm going to take up an hour of your time because I got a lot of questions about my own body. And if they rush you out of there, or if they make you feel stupid or whatever, find a different doctor. Like, and I know that's easier said than done because not everybody is as obnoxious as me, but you are your only advocate and your best advocate. And you have to be able to do that for yourself because no one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah. And that is another reason why it's so important to talk to people, and that we could spend a whole episode on why gossip is called gossip. But there is this level of, you know, hey, I felt kind of weird at the doctor the other day because he said this or did this. And it's like, yes, wait, that is weird, or that is not supposed to happen. Or, oh yeah, I heard about this happening and that's actually harmful. Or no, you are right that you're this like weird twinge that you have. This is not okay. It's not okay.
Yeah.
And so,
and it can go the other way though.
Case,
but it can also go the other way of you tell that to someone and they go, oh, okay, well, I can understand why that might be uncomfortable, but actually I've had that same experience.
That's totally normal. Right.
You know, whatever. And that's a broader conversation that then you can have with your therapist of why did that impact me? Why did it feel like it shouldn't have been okay? Asking yourself those questions too, and working on why things that come up for you. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to that.
Yeah, I feel like this case definitely felt like it touched on a lot of different things as far as trust, mistrust. And obviously in this case, this is so isolated and so individualistic, and so like the power here was so
very specific.
There was no power. It's one way, right? So it's like, I totally understand in these situations, you know, in this specific case, it's like there is no fault here for the women who stepped into this space in this trust. And it's like, that's the other thing too, as much as it's like encouraging myself, encouraging others to ask questions, it's also not even on you to have to be the one. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, and especially because like in this case specifically, there was no opportunity to do that. No. You know, you went one time to someone that you expected to be able to trust and you never left there.
So scary. And I can only imagine too, like, this is where this is like my wandering mind, right? Where I'm like, oh, were the women used as part of we see that all the time, where it's like there are people who are used as kind of these co-signers, where it's like, oh, this is a safe space because this person, especially it's like, oh, this is a woman who is also here. They're safe. It's fine, So I just can only imagine how, that kind of stuff was introduced and included. So and so funny because I look at the time and I'm like, okay, this is twice as long as I thought it was going to be. So
I knew it would be.
Anyways, so yeah, I feel so encouraged and encouraging to really think about challenging my appeasement parts. One of the main things I've been working through is appeasement is not always just landing in appeasement, also how important community is.
Yeah, and I think in a more modern sense, like always tell people where you're going. Because even, all these girls think about the fact that they were like, I don't know, they're just gone until finally someone wasn't.
Witnessed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Look,
I have my location shared with like so many people.
Oh yeah, me too. And I love it because I'll get texts from people that are like, why are you in so-and-so? And I like that.
I do too. Yeah. Like, oh, you're checking on me.
Yeah, like why are you driving to so-and-so? What are you doing? Or I'll say like, I'm going on a date and I'm here. And if you see my location go anywhere but here, call 911.
Also, it doesn't matter if you're going out with someone you've been out before. Tell your friends the first and last name of the person you are going out on a date with, or that you're going out with to meet, whatever. Get their first and their last name, be a little detective, and make sure that you tell people where you're going and what their name is. Not that again, I always go back to, I'll like talk about this kind of stuff and I'm like, it's not your responsibility to make sure that you don't die. And unfortunately, we're in the position where that's part of the conversations we have to have.
Yeah, of course. But it's also like, why wouldn't you do everything to set yourself up for success and safety? So well, good job, Jerry.
Thank you so much.
This was a bizarre, upsetting, fascinating, educational case.
Well, I'm really looking forward to what you have in store for us next time.
It'll be lighter.
Great. This time I did switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, we really switched places. This one, my next week will be a little bit lighter. Be some goofs.
Some goofs and some gaffs.
Some goofs and gaffs. And also, I mean, still like crime. And
still crime. And still
fascinating stuff. And maybe some spooky bits. But
spooky.
But definitely no, bodily fluids.
No bodily fluids. All right. See y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.